Hello, everyone. Welcome to BERA CERA Academic Publishing Webinar Series 2 this year. This series is co-organized by BERA Early Career Research Network and the Chinese Educational Research Association in the UK. We hope our webinar series is useful for you. Today, we have our second webinar focusing on academic publishing from the early career researchers' perspectives. Our next webinar will share perspectives on navigating peer reviewing for academic journals on 8th October. So today, we are very honored to have our speaker, Dr. Archana Gupta from University of Surrey here to be with us today. Archana is a research fellow in the Department of Sociology at the University of Surrey. She has published widely, including topics such as the heterogeneity of middle-class advantage, teacher entrepreneurialism, and the social legitimacy of private tutoring in India. We are very looking forward to hearing Archana's perspectives on academic publishing. Now let's welcome Archana to give her talk. Archana, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tige. So today, when I was thinking about choosing a cover page for my presentation, I just couldn't help but choose this particular slide, which shows seasonal change, because I thought it resembled in significant ways the process and various stages of academic publishing, starting from conceptualizing an idea, putting it all together, providing evidence for it, and submitting it for reviews, receiving some feedback and comments, and then working it with those comments, and then probably submitting it again. And then towards the end of it all, you would be able to see the labor of your work in the form of a published piece. And so introduction. Well, thank you so much again, Tige, for covering this section, but at the same time, I thought it was important to sort of give some idea about how I position myself as an early career academic. So this is largely speaking my timeline. I completed my PhD in 2018 from National University of Singapore. And since then, I have held postdoctoral positions in 3 higher education institutions in Singapore and within the UK. And I think it's important to note that some people see themselves as early career academic whilst they are pursuing PhD. But I think for me, it was soon after completing the PhD, because it's then when I decided that I wanted to stay in academia and pursue my career in this field. But now I just wanted to know a little bit about you, just so that every one of us have some understanding of where we are at. I apologize for the slide, because I think you provided your feedback on this, a similar slide just now. Oh, wow. So brilliant. So majority of the people are PhD candidates. Some are also about to start their PhD. We have good proportion of, the numbers are changing because many people are responding. That's brilliant. Okay, so nonetheless, majority are PhD candidates. Some might be starting with the idea of the PhD or about to start the PhD. We also have senior professors amongst us and lecturers, so you can verify what I'm saying is accurate or not. Postdocs, brilliant. Okay, so that's very helpful. I have another interactivity just for all of us to sort of brainstorm what we consider as various forms of academic publishing. So this is a word cloud. So you can just write, for example, book, journal article, or blogs. This is just for us to sort of map the horizons that we would be situating ourselves in, and what are the places which we might be considering for publications. So journal articles is the most dominant and the only one at this point right now. Any other forms of publishing that you could think of? I do have some in the next slide, but I just thought we could just work together on this just so that just in case I missed out on any of those. Blogging, brilliant. Guest articles. So that's different to journal articles. Books, blogging papers, podcast, book chapter, fantastic. Conference proceedings, yeah, I missed out on that one. Reviews, yes, brilliant. Posters, book chapter, journal articles still remain the dominant form of academic publishing. Monograph, great. So we already know a little bit about how we can get our work published, in what format, for example. So that's a very useful slide for all of us. So when I was preparing for this presentation, these are the ones that I could think of. So the first one, obviously, publishing your work as a book. So this can be multiple ways in which you can understand this. One is your monograph. So you have written a book and you're the only author and you have worked with all the arguments that you have presented there by yourself. Another way to look at book as a form of academic publishing is when you co-author a book. So you come together, some people who sort of like each other's work and think in the same way, or are passionate about one topic, and just have stakes in every single chapter, really, that is presented in that book. So it is a co-authored book. Another example is co-edited book. So as an editor, you can partner with other people who might be interested in editing, and you co-edit various chapters which other people would have contributed to your book, and that's how you publish a book. Another fourth way that I could think of is co-editing. No, once again, it was co-authored. And yeah, in another way that you can do this is when you are contributing to an edited book already as an author, as an individual author of one of the chapters. Third, obviously, this is something that majority of you have already identified. This was the first thing that appeared in the word cloud: journal article. Blog post, I also mentioned this. It really depends on how you think about this. There are different platforms which offer you to write a blog post, because in some or other way, you can understand it as a form of academic publishing, but also not really a form of academic publishing. I would argue it is, because depending on the platform that you would choose, it could be very academically oriented, and you would nonetheless be talking about your research, the things that you have found. So it is definitely a form of academic publishing from my point of view. Reviews, this is also something that popped up in the word cloud. Well, reviews could be multiple kind of reviews: film reviews, book reviews, review essay. So review essays, for example, are usually published in journals as well. So there are different ways in which you can understand reviews as well. So reviews could also be when you are writing an academic piece in response to a work that has been published. It could be a journal article as well. And when you're responding to the comments that the scholar has provided, that could also be considered as a form of response. And this would all be sort of put together in some ways as a form of academic conversation, and therefore it is a form of academic publishing. Podcasts, again, this is something which is quite popular nowadays when everything has moved online. So depending on, again, the platform that you choose for podcast, because in the podcast you are talking about a particular field, you may be talking about your own research. I would argue that it is a form of academic publishing, and it is available for many people to view later on and get inspired by. And from the early career perspective, nonetheless, I would emphasize that books and journal articles are usually most traditionally established forms of academic publishing. When I say from the ECR perspective, it's because to emphasize that we are in the stages where we want to secure permanent positions or research fellowships, postdocs, research associateship. And when you're applying for these jobs, if you have already published your work in the form of a journal article or book, then it just becomes a nice way in which you can argue that you have potential and capability to academically engage in a particular field and therefore contribute to the project that you're applying for or the fellowship that you're applying for. So although there are various ways in which you can publish your work, books and journal articles nonetheless remain the more established forms of academic publishing and evaluating your skills at academic publishing. So my publication record is this. I have tried to publish my work in different platforms, in different ways, in different modes, but majority of my work has been published as journal articles. Because of this, focus of my today's presentation really would be peer-reviewed journal articles, and I would be covering two main aspects of it. First one is publishing from doctoral thesis, or doctoral research rather, and second, publishing collaboratively with others. What I will not be covering today is publishing your thesis into a book. For this, I'll suggest that you check out this podcast, which is, I think, the follow-up of the last year's academic publishing from ECR perspective, where Yang Hu talks about his experience of publishing his thesis into a book. My points of discussions would be this: first, foremost, why publish? Second, the structure of an academic journal article, very briefly. And then publishing from my doctoral research, I'll give some examples and some approaches to publishing in this way. And then co-authoring, which would be based on my doctoral work. I will provide some examples and some suggestions. And I'll end this presentation with 5 top tips that I could think of. Some things that I have abided by, or some things that I have learned in the process of my career so far. Okay, first thing first, let's have a look at how we are situated in the form, in terms of publishing a journal article. So this is a multiple choice question. So what has been your own form of publishing a journal article? So majority of people have oh no, okay, so numbers are changing, of course. So people have published a paper, thinking about it, currently writing a journal article. Okay, brilliant. So nobody's first paper is currently under review. Okay, great to know that everybody cares about it though. Okay, brilliant. So I'm thinking about publishing a paper. That's the majority of you are currently at. And then the people who have published at least one paper, okay, so reasonable number, 30%. I'm currently writing a journal article. Brilliant. Okay. Great. So I hope what I'm going to talk about would be relevant to all of you, especially the majority of the people who are currently in the audience, who are thinking about publishing a paper. Okay. So why publish? Whenever I think about why I should publish, I think about many things all at once. And I think these are the views of majority of early career academics as well. Or not even just ECRs, but everybody who is in academia. One is that I need to tell people what I have found, something new and exciting. And I need to tell people that this is the work that I have done and this is the output for you to see and observe or maybe comment on. Second is, this might be relevant again, to everybody, but also early career academics who want to start their career in academia and sustain it. It's a part of requirement. Some of the, depending on the school, depending on the degree program that you are enrolled in, at postgraduate level, also the country you are in, there might be expectations of you to publish your work. And then in the meantime, you might also be thinking it would be nice to publish. I want to actually converse with the people in my field and discuss some of the things that I'm passionate about, and surely other people are also passionate about. One of the things that we think about when we think about why publish is to think about what kind of research questions we would want to engage ourselves with. And I found this very interesting video of Venki Ramakrishnan, Nobel laureate. And let's hear from him what he thinks about it.
I think you have to feel that it's both interesting and important. If you feel it and other people don't, well, actually, that's an advantage. Then you're not going to be competing with dozens of people. If it's very obviously interesting and important, fine, but be aware that there'll be hundreds of other people who will also realize that it's interesting and important and will be working on the problem. So I would say those are the two really important criteria, which is you have to find it interesting and you have to believe that it's important in some way. Important doesn't necessarily mean it's important for medicine or applications, but it's important for that body of knowledge, in terms of advancing knowledge.
So my understanding of this is not too dissimilar, but every time when I'm writing a piece of work, I always take the approach of an interventionist. So I always think I would like to contribute to what we as a group of scholars know and we as a community know, and how we as a group of people who are interested in a particular topic think, and how something that we may not have thought about previously may be critical to examine now in order to understand the broader dynamic of the topic that you might be exploring. Very quickly touching on the structure of an academic article, because once you have decided that your approach to it is interventionist, for example, or that you just want to exploratory kind of approach, then you still have to structure everything in a particular way in order for you to get it published. So in terms of journal articles, again, this is not something that you don't know about. I'm sure that all of us have some understanding of how to structure an article. But very specific things that I wanted to share is, first thing first, publishing agencies, Sage, Routledge, and Taylor and Francis, for example, they may offer very useful overall guidance about how to structure your journal article. This, for example, is a resource which I found where in Sage Publishing that talks about, generally speaking, how you should think about structuring your article and what are the things that you need to respond to in order to make that structure work for your article. Again, I would suggest that it depends on your field. I'm a sociologist of education, so I don't think that I would be writing a heading called results, because it doesn't really make sense to me. As an interpretive sociologist, I'm likely to have thematic analysis presented across 3 different themes or 4 different themes, depending on the topic I'm exploring, as well as my introduction would be longer. I would not only talk about introduction of the paper, but also conceptual framework and empirical grounding of the project. So you can sort of learn from it, but at the same time, I wanted to emphasize that all the questions I would still address when I'm writing my article. So you can learn from it, try addressing all the questions that they have asked. Obviously, you can structure it the way it works in your own specific field. Whilst the publishing agency would provide you with the overall guidance, the journals that you are interested in, a specific journal that you're interested in publishing a specific article, will provide you very particular requirements for submitting and preparing your work for submission. This you can find under either of these two headings, submission guidelines or instructions for authors. So instruction for authors, again, I took this snapshot from Educational Review, in which I've recently published an article, very clearly outlines how much should be the word limit, for example, word limit for the abstract, what should be included, what should not be included. You can check out the aims and the scope of each of the journals to see whether or not your article fits into any of the aspects that they want to explore as part of that journal. Again, this is something which has been discussed heavily in the previous academic publishing webinar, BERA. So exploring aims and the scope is definitely not a waste of time. It's so useful for you to find out whether or not the journal that you are looking at or aspiring for publishing fits the criteria of publication. So it works both ways, what you want and what they want in an article and publication. Okay, so publishing from my doctoral research. So this is the cover page of my PhD. As I said, I completed my PhD in 2018. And my PhD research was about, it was an ethnographic study of private tutoring in Dehradun city in northern India. And I was basically trying to look at formal education practices and schooling practices, more broadly speaking, from the perspective of private tuition industry. From this work, very recently, well, I thought it would have come out by the time I'm presenting, but it's forthcoming article in Educational Review. And this is about exposing the shadow. So it is an empirical scrutiny of shadowing process of private tutoring in India. This particular aspect of shadowing process was one of the sections of one of my thesis chapters. So in many ways, I sort of got inspired by some of the discussions that I had already presented in 2018. But because private tutoring is such an evolving field, majority of the works that I read, which were relevant for this particular piece, were published after I had completed my PhD. So in 2019, 2020, and I just sort of restructured every single argument in that way to respond to the ongoing discussions and debates. It also involves sharpening some of the arguments that I had already presented as part of the thesis chapter. But again, it was really about updating myself with the more recent literature and rethinking some of the arguments that I had already made in my thesis. This also involved going back to the data and looking at if there is something else that I can sort of draw on in order to strengthen or make a new point or maybe strengthen some of the arguments that I make. Another example is this. This is the second section of the same chapter. And this was very much focused on sociological analysis of how institutional arrangement of private tutoring looks like. Again, this involves some of the upgrading of arguments that I made. In the thesis chapter, I did not think about some of the things that I have written here that much. I didn't consider them to be that much important because that particular chapter had a different focus than what is the focus of this article. So therefore, it requires some sort of reworking with various arguments that I make. Oops. This is another example of publishing from doctoral research, not necessarily doctoral thesis. I had made some of the arguments about teachers' work in my thesis, but not really about teachers' identity formation. And when I was going through the main data that I had produced as part of my PhD, I realized this was a topic which was A, underexplored in the empirical context, B, needs to be talked about because I just felt morally obligated to tell the story of teachers and just the story of teachers, because more often than not, teachers are blamed for providing private tuition. So this is what inspired writing this article. It obviously required a lot more work than the other articles because although it was based on my doctoral research, the discussions that it has are not presented in my doctoral thesis. Finally, this was published. This was the first article that I published from my doctoral work. And relatively easy because I already knew the literature. I knew that this was a journal where I wanted to publish this article because the majority of the articles that I found important for understanding parental investment and particularly social class dynamic were published in BJSE. And of course, BJSE is one of the leading journals in my field. So it was quite clear for me to structure it in ways that it speaks to some of the discussions that are already there in the journal and generally, broadly speaking, in the field. So I hope this has provided you some examples of how various sections of your thesis, or maybe not just the thesis, but your doctoral research more broadly, can help you form arguments for the journal article that you are thinking of publishing. Specific suggestions, broadly speaking, I think it is always useful to resituate the key arguments in the literature. So your thesis is a coherent work. So you already have one main argument, and every single thing that you are writing in your thesis is in many ways supporting that main argument. And when you're writing a journal article, you have to therefore do the same work in many ways that you did for your doctoral work, doctoral thesis, that is to resituate the key argument, the specific argument that you are making there within the body of literature that you are referring to. Again, the example would be the educational review paper that I published, where I had to rethink about what is the latest development in the field. And the things that I'm talking about, do they actually make sense, particularly relevant to the Indian context and more broadly has potential to contribute to the field of shadow education. This process also helps you to choose the right home for the article, as I suggested previously. Second point I have is enhance, not just reproduce chapter arguments. And I think it is very, very important to start thinking about contributing to the discourse in the field. You may have made your arguments, but as the time passed by, especially right after you have submitted your thesis, you would have thought of something which you did not include when you were writing. So this is an opportunity for you to not just reproduce what you have already written, but actually enhance those sets of arguments and provide maybe more evidence. The data that you could not really include and had to delete can come into the journal article that you want to publish. Opportunity to strengthen various arguments and create new ones. And I think, again, it's somewhat similar, but at the same time, I would say creating new arguments is also important. So one thing that you have thought about, you could not include your thesis, but at the same time, because after your PhD, you know the field, and then you know who are the people you would be following in terms of their work, new project and whatnot. So you know what are the main arguments which have been developed right after you have completed your PhD. And that's an opportunity to create new arguments. Even whilst you are in PhD, because I appreciate that majority of people are enrolled in a PhD program, I think it is important to see as you go on from year 1 to year 3, you would have learned so much already about your field. You know the people. So again, when you're writing the article, something you may not want to discuss in your thesis because it would take you off the main argument. Journal article might be the way where you can have those, engage with those sets of arguments. So basically what I want to say, what I'm trying to say here is that turning a part of your thesis into an academic piece in its own right is the goal that you would be aspiring for when you are thinking about publishing from your doctoral thesis or your doctoral work, more broadly speaking. Now the next discussion point, co-authoring. Before we do this, I just wanted to know what are your thoughts on co-authoring. It would be great to hear from professors and senior lecturers as well, who I assume would have more experience of collaborative work. So just 1 or 3 words would do. This is a word cloud activity. So just write 1 or 2 or maybe 3 words about what is your view on co-authoring. So examples that I gave previously were stressful learning opportunity. Great, brilliant. Definitely can't argue with that. You learn a lot. Some things work out, some things don't work out. Either way, you learn. Not sure. Right. Healthful. Okay, so something that you may not know, but then you learn new things, so it may be helpful in terms of personal development. Complicated. This must be a senior person, I'm assuming, but maybe not. Never assume. Great point of view. Frustrating. Helpful, important, strengthens your work. Good opportunity, valuable learning experience, insightful. Oh, wow. Complicated. Oh, that's very, very interesting. Developmental, risky. Never tried it. Okay, fair enough. Challenging and rewarding. Okay, yes. Division of labor. Fantastic. Shared knowledge. Brilliant. Valuable learning experience. I think I covered that already. Important, yes. Long process. Requires organization. Okay, brilliant. So you have to not just organize yourself, because as a single authored writer, you just be organizing yourself, but you have to potentially organize other people as well in the team. Great. I'm missing anything? Risky, valuable, yes. Requires organization, burden shared. This is another important way of looking at it, that as a single author, you might be doing all the work, but when you are collaborating, particularly co-authoring rather, the burden of that is shared, really. So it becomes sort of shared knowledge. So I'm looking at this word shared a lot, which is brilliant. But yeah, I think all emotions are valid. Regarding a new thing. Okay, but majority of you think it is complicated. So let's see how it. I don't want to say like how it works out next, but my experience of it is what I will share now. And not alone. I really like that one. Very interesting, because it could be a very gruesome process. So you're not alone. That's always reassuring. Okay, so my experience of co-authoring has been this. So these are the titles below, and these are the journals where I have published. Again, children's geographies is forthcoming. Others have been published. The first one that came out was the BERA journal, British Education Research Journal, and more recently, Sociology. So what I have learned first, and this sort of might be seen as covering some of the aspects, some of the emotions that you may have. One, be careful and be very clear. I think because it requires so much of organization, and you don't know the necessarily everything about the person that you are collaborating with. So there is somewhat risk, as some of you have pointed out, is involved in the process. So what is helpful, what I have learned, is to be very, very clear as to what is it that you're interested in. What is the division of labor, as some of you have already pointed out as well. So shared sort of opportunity for you to do something together. So be very clear about your instructions, your expectations, as well as be very, very vigilant and careful about what others expect from you. So you have to hold other people accountable, but knowing that you are also held accountable, and you provide all the support that they need. If there's one person who is leading the article, if you are the one who is leading the article, probably it would be best for you to be very, very clear about what is it that you want to get out of this particular project. Be very careful. Again, this is something that some of you have pointed out. This is again really because it takes a long time because there are many people involved, arguably, or also depends on the project that you are doing. But at the same time, I think it is very, very important to be very careful in terms of your time management. Have your priorities set out. It does take a little bit of longer time in some cases. So be very careful in terms of managing yourself. That's not the only thing that you do in your academic career. There are other things that you're doing. So make sure that there is that kind of time management and priorities set up for you. Third is collaborative. So rewarding. Again, something that you have mentioned, to just provide the support that you can. Others would provide you the support as well. So it's a fantastic collaborative opportunity. You are not alone, as one person suggested. So you're all working together with something that is shared, so shared knowledge. So it could be a very, very rewarding experience if it all works out as planned. Second thing I learned is there are multiple ways of collaborating. So the 4 examples that I just gave, the previous slide, 2 of these articles I co-wrote with people. In one article, I provided extensive feedback on the first draft. So I was not the leading author, but I provided the analysis that I had produced of one strand of the project, as well as read the draft carefully multiple times and provided as much feedback, not just in a sense of, oh, this is wrong, this is right, but more in a sense of, we could potentially look at these things and be very helpful. Go to the data and then find out what is it that you're actually talking about. So be useful reviewer too. Be very critical, but also very constructive. Work on ideas. This is again something, if you can, work on the ideas that you're really, really passionate about and the people that you really, really like. So I think it just saves a lot of time when you're thinking about co-authoring with people. Finally, be open to learning. Again, as many people suggested, this is a brilliant learning opportunity. Everyone has different way of thinking. Everyone who is involved in the team may have different expertise. They obviously would have had different kinds of experiences in life. And I think I cannot emphasize that enough. Like, even those experiences can sort of help you look at the same thing in a very different way, overall enhancing various arguments that you make in your article. And that really helps with the reviewing process, because you have already thought about every single thing that reviewer 1 or 2 may be thinking about as well, or maybe reviewer 3, and editors, of course. Another thing I wanted to say is about the spatial issues. This is something that you may have done already. If you haven't, what I did was I co-organized a conference, and then we contacted the journal to see if there was an interest in publishing a spatial issue. And we also asked what was the potential timeline for this. And once we had those information, that information, then we just sent out the call for papers to the people who had presented in this conference. So we already knew about their work in some ways. Then we did the sorting. So we selected, I said 5 to 6 articles because one of the articles was ours. And this was a fantastic opportunity, although I probably should not be spending more time on this because that's not the focus here, but it was such a great experience to do the guest editing work for this journal, to see the things from the other side, so to speak, not literally actually. And yeah, once everything was in order, all the papers that we had put together were accepted. I co-wrote the introduction. So overall, at the end of this process, we had 2 separate publications. This takes time, obviously, but what you can do if you are not going to a conference which has this information about we are looking forward to, we may want to, or we will perhaps publish the presentations made in this particular seminar as a special issue in a journal. They may have actually mentioned that when you are looking for call for papers for conferences, or maybe not. But another way to do this is if you go to journal's webpage that you are interested in publishing and see a column called call for papers. So that's usually open call for papers, which you can then explore and see whether or not the main description of the special issue works with your idea of for the paper. If it does, submit, and this is a similar process of reviewing. Okay, so that was the main content really of this presentation. Now 5 top tips, quickly going through these. First one, investigate platform for publishing. Second, look for the format of publishing. So I have discussed most of these here. One thing that I did not discuss is research-informed articles in public domain. So this is, I published recently really, which was based on the article which was published in HERD. And this was really about what's the purpose of university. Your answer may depend on how much it costs you. It's a very catchy title, and it was such a great experience writing for the conversation as well. Different skill set is required, so it's always good to sort of publish some of your work that you have already published in a more academically oriented platforms, then publish them here in public domain, just to sort of make sure that your work is reached. There is a great outreach of the project, not just to the academic community, but wider public as well. Impact. Top tip, another, start out slowly, but steadily. Pace yourself, in other words. I always took my assignments very, very seriously, because for me, it was the first time I was writing anything academic. So see whether or not what I'm writing makes sense from an academic point of view. Another thing I did was to write book reviews and blog posts. This, I think, is an upgrade from writing assignments, primarily because I knew that what I'm writing is going in public domain. So I had that pressure as well, just to see how I respond to this. Again, it involves learning to form an argument, provide evidence, because they will not publish it otherwise. Writing book chapters was another strategy for me, something that you may want to explore as well. This is a more guided and focused analysis that you would be doing, and very specific discussion, because you have to respond to the call for papers, call for book chapters. So it's very structured in that way. And then I started writing the journal articles. Why in this order? Because by the time I was writing my first journal article, I knew I had to be very independent. I knew I had to be very focused and bring everything together in a very disciplinary way, because I might like a theory and I just can spend maybe 5,000 words writing that, but that's not a space that a journal article would allow you for. So you have to condense it or present it slightly differently. So it's a more disciplined way of writing from my perspective, yeah. Top 3 tips. Top tip number 3, enjoy as you manage and organize things. I think that I just wanted to emphasize this a little bit, because this is not discussed as much as it should be. But mental health of particularly doctoral researchers is something that actually demands attention. This has been published, I think it was 2019 in Nature, but also there has to be more and more conversations about this, more and more understanding of how can we potentially enjoy and not make this process of publishing a burden on ourselves. So one video quickly, again, Banki Ramakrishnan talking about work-life balance.
My attitude is that you have to take the long view about it. You have to think of science as a marathon and not a sprint. And you have to also realize if you're working nonstop all the time, you will burn out. I have always tried to balance work and life. So for example, I'm not one of these 24/7 scientists. When I started my biology career, I had a 6-week-old child and a 6-year-old stepdaughter. Well, I couldn't just, ignore my family and just work around the clock. I've always had this idea that, you take weekends off as much as possible. Maybe not the entire weekend, but a substantial part of it. I've always had hobbies. I've always had outside interests. Even during the middle of the ribosome race, I started learning Spanish in evening classes. These are all ways to get away from your work and just do something else. And what I find is when you do that, you come back to your work with renewed vigor. Sometimes you think of things that you wouldn't think about if you were just worrying about it, but you go off and relax, and suddenly ideas come to you, or you find a way out of some stumbling block. I would encourage people not to be too narrow and to try and have a good work-life balance.
So again, just to rephrase everything that Venki said, I completely understand and appreciate every single thing that he suggested. I think it's so very important to make time for yourself. It's very difficult if you're a doctoral student because then it just takes over your life in many ways. But it's important to draw boundaries whenever you can, and even early on in your PhD, because it's always great to set good habits. Your time is not just for yourself and your thesis, it is for the friends, it is for the family. Obviously, it is for your supervisor and you are discussing things with them, and also your partner. And so you can then probably be able to see how you manage your time so that you can give your time to every single person who you appreciate, you love. And that really strikes a good work-life balance once you are able to see that you have to manage your time to actually live your life. Life does not start necessarily after your PhD, it's ongoing. So it's always important to reflect on it and set good habits for yourself. Always good to allocate time for writing, explore existing or new writing groups. This is something that I did when I was studying in Cambridge, and I think we had fantastic writing group across colleges. So we would all come together and write together. It's always useful because we would have short breaks where we can just discuss what are the issues that we might be facing. And you would soon realize you're not on your own. There are many other people who have taken on charge of the same kind of journey that you are on. So it's always great to have that kind of companionship, so to speak. So always explore ways in which you can write together, work together. Something that I had to think about every single time because I'm really bad at it. Writing publishing particularly involves all these aspects: reading, editing, analyzing. I will feel really bad if I have not really written 500 words a day, for example. But I had to sort of really tell myself that it was still productive because I had read 2 really good articles. So I think, again, this is a tip from me. If you think it is worth considering, please do, because obviously mental health is really, really important. And it's so very important to enjoy the process because that's the only way you would see any value in it. And I think this is valuable only because you're enjoying the process. Network, not overrated. I think this is, again, I did think that it was overrated, but it is really not. I think it's so very important to speak to the people in your field because there would be the opportunity for you. You would be able to share your ideas, discuss your ideas, publish your ideas, get feedback. It's so important, again, therefore, to establish and consolidate these networks. You may be organizing a conference together and then maybe thinking about asking the people who have published in there to contribute to the special issue. You may be co-editing a book, for example. So it's very, very important to do this work, assign time for this, and make sure that it does not really take up the space and time you have set for yourself in terms of publication, but it is also important to do this simultaneously. Skill and knowledge assessment. I would suggest assessing the skills that you are developing. Because for example, when I published my work in a public domain, academically oriented and academically informed article in a public domain, I realized I didn't have the right skills. I had to develop those skills to present my findings in a non-academic way and be very accessible. I think it is therefore useful to always assess what you have, what you don't, so that you can identify those knowledge and skill gaps. Reflect on those gaps. One of the reasons why I am in academia and have decided to pursue an academic career is precisely because there is always room for growth and improvement. So this could be an extremely rewarding experience as well. So putting it on paper helps to make sense of it. This is it from me. Final thought, will it be easy? Nope. But worth it? Absolutely. But specifically if you wanted to pursue your career in academia. And I think the people who are already pursuing the academic career amongst us would also agree with me on this. So this was me. Thank you very much for listening and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ashila, for your very insightful thoughts. I found it very useful for me, actually, personally, to reflect on my publishing experience. Now we have some questions. I found they are quite interesting. So let's have a look. I think one of them. Okay, the question, these two questions are related together. So what would be a common expectation for assistant professor to publish on an annual basis?
I think you are best positioned to answer that question rather than I am. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really. I think you have shared some very useful, tips or experience, because we need to think about our job requirements first, right? And also we need to balance our time and life. So definitely, I think personally for myself, I would set up personal goals. For example, perhaps a journal article per year, and actually this is related to my job requirements as well, especially for REF assessment. So I think this is really personal. I don't think there is a common guideline for us to publish a certain number of articles or books. What do you think?
I mean, just to add, I totally agree with you. I think it also depends on the country that you're in. So, for example, if you're in the States or in Singapore, where there is established tenure track system, then they will have the requirement within 6 years that you should have published, for example, 10 pieces of work. So it really depends on what is the requirement of that academic community and academic industry, really. But I agree with you, one per year sounds brilliant.
Yeah, just an example, basically. I think I do agree with you as well. So it really depends on the specific, university, country, and your personal circumstances as well, and how you balance your life and the time, right? And basically your teaching and research as well, because I think for different positions, you have different, workload in terms of your teaching and research.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I think this question actually related to this one. So how often do we have to publish? I think this is a more general question.
I mean, what do you mean by we? Are you talking as a PhD student, or you're talking as a post-PhD in the postdoc position? Because it really depends on the kind of jobs that you want to do in the future. If you're already in the established academic career, a permanent position, then probably, as you suggested, 1-2 articles per year would be okay, and you would simultaneously be doing book editing and other things. But the thing is, if you are in my position, for example, the postdoc, then probably you would have to publish from your thesis, from your doctoral work, not necessarily from your thesis, but from your doctoral work, because that's where your expertise lies. And this is what the people would be evaluating when you're applying for a lectureship or assistant professorship roles. So getting one solid article from a doctoral research is brilliant. argue. And when you are in your PhD, because some of the works that I published during my PhD were not really related to my doctoral work, because I didn't know at the time what I'm going to write in my thesis. So it really depends on what career stage probably you are in. That's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I actually find you have published quite a lot from your thesis. So I guess one question for me personally, do you think is it easier for you to publish after you have finished your thesis, or or perhaps some people are thinking, oh, I need to publish during my PhD research project?
I think it is definitely easier because you have already completed one major task. And whilst, as I mentioned earlier during the presentation, you just know the literature, you just know the people, you know where to look for a particular information. So for me, I think it was much, much easier for me to publish things after I had completed my PhD. Obviously, I could get these things out primarily because I had already thought about them when I was in my PhD, but they actually developed and took shape and flourished in some ways when I had completed, because I had perhaps more understanding of the topic as well.
Mm. Yeah, you also suggested that actually by publishing your findings or arguments from your thesis, actually you need to look at the literature again and actually developing your arguments. Do you think that process is quite difficult, or do you find actually it's quite rewarding?
It's both difficult and rewarding. It could be both, but I think it depends on what you are publishing, because all 4 articles that I gave examples of from my doctoral work, they're also very different in texture. 2 of these articles may be embedded in the same literature, but they are definitely speaking to a different group of people, different topics. So teacher entrepreneurialism, for example, is about neoliberalizing education space. It's more conceptual. Obviously, that involved much work because I had not made those kind of arguments in my thesis. So it depends on the work that you are publishing. Other articles might be considered as relatively easier because you have already talked about them, you know the literature very well, and you just have to sort of enhance them, because that's an opportunity for you to do when you're publishing as journal article. So it really depends the topic that you're exploring and how far it is from the arguments that you are making in your thesis.
Thank you, really useful. We have a very interesting question here, actually has been recommended by other participants here. So how risky is to co-author with PhD supervisor?
I haven't had this experience, so I'm not entirely sure. But what I have heard from my friends, so my answer would be based on that. It really depends. The nature of the supervisor. Academia can be very kind, but it can also be very brutal. So it depends on what their expectations are. If you feel, my suggestion would be, if you feel that you would benefit from having your supervisor on board and would learn in the process, and if that relationship is not just the co-authorship, it's a relationship, if that relationship helps you to become independently, you can basically, after this relationship, publish independently, then I think one should get into this. It also, again, depends on the ethics of the supervisor, how they are thinking about this, whether or not they are thinking about doing that kind of work in terms of helping the student and supervisor develop, or they have different ideas and thoughts in mind. So it really depends on the relationship that you have with your supervisor and what kind of person you are and what kind of person is your supervisor. So it's very subjective. From my perspective, I have never really co-authored with my supervisor because I think she was very, very clear from the very beginning. Fantastic supervisor, very supportive. but just very generously provided me with the comments, which I then worked with to publish my own individual sole authored articles. Yeah, so it really depends. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, in my case, I didn't publish my work with my supervisor as well, because he's very busy, and also he actually research focus has slightly different from mine. So he has, when I started my research project with him, actually he has a kind of has focused something else. So I think that's a specific circumstance you mentioned. It really depends on personal, situation. But I have heard from my friends as well, it is a really useful experience for early career researchers, especially if you haven't got any experience of publishing, articles or book chapters or other sorts of publications. I think it's really good experience to work with your supervisor, and you can get somebody who are experienced to give you right direction and help you actually guide you through the publishing process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Definitely, yes.
I just wonder, because you mentioned, you give examples about co-authorships actually through your postdoctoral research experience. So do you think, have you realized at some certain point you find you want to work with other people, or you just feel some research projects or some ideas you want to share with other people and co-produce a publication?
So I think when you're working on a project, generally speaking, ethically speaking as well at this point, it's important to be very aware of whether or not and in what capacity you are sharing the data, because that's part of the process of research, sort of being very ethical in terms of who will have access to the data. And I think from that perspective, I have never tried to do this, in a sense, publishing from the data from the project with somebody else outside the project. I have, although, explored the opportunities where I would have ownership of my data, other person may have ownership of their data, but we can work together and do a comparative analysis. So that's, again, co-authoring, but being very, very careful about the data transfer. I think that's quite important to me. But other aspect could be that you may not just have time to publish with other people because you're just doing the work for one article, co-writing with other people, but you are also providing support for other article. So it's just not, personally, I just, it was ethical reasons, but also I just didn't have time. It was just things that were already laid out. This is how we would do it together. And it was not like I didn't have stakes. We sat together, we made a plan about how we will approach co-authoring, for example. So again, the point about being very clear, be very specific about your expectations and how you're going to proceed with this process, because it could be a little bit more time consuming than sole authorship, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Some people may argue by co-authoring, with other people may save time for themselves. Yeah, because they can get some, thoughts from other perspectives. Do you find by, because I think being the first author and being the second or third author is quite different, right? Do you have any experience to share on this point?
So I think it depends how you're structuring the tasks. So the division of labor, as one of the persons said. So the approach on the projects that I have been involved in terms of publications, it has been only just one person who is leading the article. And in that capacity, I just provided the analysis or some feedback on the with the analysis, and then providing extensive feedback on the first draft that the lead author has already produced. The second authorship also may involve co-writing, as I mentioned. So 2 of the articles came out of the project that I'm currently working on, were co-authored with the principal investigator on the project. So again, it's a multiple different forms of publications. You could be the 3rd or the 4th author if you have maybe just provided feedback, but not done the data collection or analysis. So it really depends on how you manage and what kind of value addition would be if you included more people. So it's really the project of the person who is leading the project. And sometimes you want to co-write, but involve other people because their feedback would be useful, as you mentioned, that just sharing the burden really and making a more robust case for something that you are proposing in the article. So it could be, it definitely would be very rewarding, but depends on how you want to structure your own team and who would do what. If you have that understanding, then it depends on how you share the authorship as well. In majority of the cases, it is decided before you write. So everybody knows what their role is. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question actually related to co-authorship. The question is, what is the taboo of co-authoring for PhD student?
What is the taboo?
Yeah.
I don't quite understand the question.
Yeah,
But
I think the question is slightly not very clear, but I guess is about co-authoring with PhD students, I guess, or
yeah, oh, that's definitely anybody who you think is interested in the topic you want to explore, and you like them, and they think alike. You must. There is. I don't think. I would never think that. Be careful. Don't publish with the PhD students. No, definitely not. Everybody has their ideas, their experiences. Publish with the people who are interested in the topic, and those who think in a similar way. I think those are the criteria rather than the um, stage of the academic career for that way. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I agree. Actually, I'm working with some PhD students at the moment for some publications. But as we have just mentioned, it's really it's kind of time management project, right? So we have to organize how we contribute to different parts of the publications, and when we're going to meet, and when we're going to analyze the data. Yeah, it's a long process, but I think it's really rewarding process as well. Yeah. Also, personally, I'm quite interested in your time management, and also how you, because I found you are so productive, at this stage. You have already got so many publications. So I wonder how you manage your time, and also especially how you locate your writing time on daily basis. Yeah.
I think I'm quite fortunate in terms of having I'm a research fellow, so I don't have the teaching duties as probably you have. So that's the more practical response, that I have more time to do research. And with regards to time management, obviously, whilst I was on the project, I was still publishing from my own doctoral research. I think for me, it is important to meet all the tasks and targets that I have set for my project, because I'm on the project, so I'm working for the project, but at the same time, making sure that I have allocated time for developing the thesis idea. And usually it is for me a continuity process. So I work with the piece until I have developed first draft. It could be 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day, depends really. But at the same time, I feel that there has to be a continuity until I get first draft out. Then I just leave it for some time, come back to it, and I make all the changes that I want to make. So usually my time management is giving 1 hour, 2 hour, but every day. So not really exhausting myself. But yeah, I have been that person as well who works Saturday, Sunday, and really late nights. I mean, definitely, especially if these are very pressing concerns where I have to get things out quicker, because as a postdoc, you obviously have these kind of pressures because you are in the transitional phase. So definitely been there, done that, but learned from it. And I now try to strike that work-life balance in my life and would try to continue that. I'm not sure if, have you managed to strike that balance yet?
Yeah, I have tried because, as you know, I have some, teaching to do and marking and other administrative tasks. So I do find it difficult on daily basis, to focus on my writing. But I do think it is very important and useful for us to develop a certain kind of habit, writing habit. So you have for example, you can have like every 2 hours per day, or you get up early and do your writing, then you carry on your work. Or perhaps for my job, actually, we have a percentage of research time, but I try to block 1 or 2 days for my research and for my writing. So this is another way I can try to secure my time for my publication. But I do find it's quite difficult because you never expect, perhaps something else will just come out, and especially during teaching, periods and marking period, you have to, pay more attention on your teaching and marking as well.
Yeah, I will. I've learned from you. We'll do this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, I find quite interesting you mentioned about, the mental health, right? Because I do find many PhD students, especially during COVID-19, they find it difficult to because by talking to other PhD students, actually, they have mentioned that they find it quite difficult to focus on the writing, and also pressure in terms of, we have to publish, before I graduate, and I have to, because I need to find looking for a job. So do you think there's any tips or ways you can share, perhaps keep the work-life balance, and also be aware of the mental health as well?
I think things that will really, really help me. I fully appreciate. I admire every single person who is submitting their thesis at this point. I do just like all the tweets about this, really, because I just admire every single one of them, because it's been so stressful, generally speaking, and getting this big piece out is just incredible. For me, what helped when I was writing my thesis and even afterwards is to have a sense of community, have a sense of belonging. And I think it's so very important. When I was working in UCL, for example, in the Institute of Education, we had created this early career network, which was open to the PhD students as well. Basically, what we were trying to do is to create a community and providing students with, and everybody who is an early career academic, with a sense of belonging, really, so that we can all come together and have this core understanding that we are all together in this journey. We all have the similar kind of issues. We can come together and discuss them. We can share resources as well. So this is what really helped me during my PhD and during my postdoc, to have this sort of setups. In some places, they were already available to me. In other places, we created them together. So I think if we could form these kinds of networks, which are not just professional networks, but also personally incredibly enriching, that's the way to make sure that you are holding yourself accountable with regards to your mental health and not just finishing your PhD. Another important thing is, again, something that you mentioned, and I think I totally agree with it, to create and sustain good habits. Time for exercise, time for meeting people, time for meeting people who are outside of academia. So I have this whole friend groups who are definitely not academics. So they think very differently. We have different kinds of conversation about music and whatnot. And make time for these kind of experiences in your life. It just gives you perspective. of where you are and what is your role in society. I also do some sort of charity work that gives me and the other people, it is useful for them, but for me it is incredibly rewarding again as well, just to provide me a sense of place and space that I occupy in the world. um, Also, I paint, so 4 things there. It could be very, very but it could be a fantastic experience when you paint, and you can just keep it to yourself or you can gift it. So has utility values, but obviously more than just utility values, it gives meaning to life. So just finding meaning to life beyond one piece of academic work is always helpful for the mental well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think peer support or, it's very important. Like Chinese Education Research Association, we are doing actually now, we try to create some Zoom regular writing retreat group, so people can come in to, develop some schedule for their writing, so they can meet and discuss, and they can work, help each other to focus on their writing. I do think this sort of peer support is so important. Yeah. We have a new question here coming up. Which one put more weight for career prospect in academia? So author or co-author publications?
Well, as we discussed in co-authorship, it depends what order you are at. So if you're a lead author, I would not, I don't know, I think the sole authorship would come first and then the co-authorship, but both sort of shows different aspects of you as an academic. One shows that you have individual independent capacity to develop a piece of writing, and the other co-authorship shows that you can work together with people and create something new. So I would not really see that one is more valuable than the other. Some people may argue that sole authorship is more valuable when evaluating your academic potential and capacities. But I would just say that both of these things sort of show different aspects of you as an academic. So these could be, both would be valuable depending on how you look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because some job requirements actually have emphasized in terms of your publications, the percentage your contribution, right? So I think it's good to have both. So author, it shows your independent, work, and you are able to conduct your research project and publish your findings. And also, I think co-authors publication actually are very good evidence for you as well to work with other people collaboratively. So you are able to, contribute to the research community, and by working with others. Yeah, both of them are very useful to work on. I guess, as you said, it depends on your time and also your stage or your career. Some people may find the co-author publication is more difficult, and they can start with co-authoring publications with other people. Or some people find because we need to spend more time on managing, organizing co-author publication process. So in that case, we perhaps want to focus on our own publications. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think if you have this, you have already produced this kind of skill set in yourself and the knowledge base to write independently, then when you are co-authoring, then it is much more valuable, not just for the team that you are writing with, but also for yourself, because you would be then enhancing your understanding of publications, knowledge as well, obviously, because other people will have different ideas of the topic. But yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite aware of the time. Thank you so much for your time today, and I find your experience perspectives very useful, especially for me to think about my publishing experience and how I'm going to manage my career, basically. How I'm going to do with my own publications. I hope participants who are joining this session find this presentation useful, and I hope you can take away something, and perhaps for you to reflect on your own experience. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I definitely learned from your responses as well. Just wanted to mention that too.